Hi, in today's video we're going to do some basic troubleshooting on a NuTone IMA406. These troubleshooting steps also apply to the earlier IM406. This is an IMA406L in the light elm color, and it was sent to me by Tim in North Carolina. This unit was made in 1978, and Tim sent it in because it had some problems, and before he decided to send it in, I had him do some basic troubleshooting to make sure that the master station was the problem and it wasn't something else. There are only really a few problems that occur with IM and IMA406s. What the homeowner will see is typically some type of problem that affects the system in a way that the music no longer will play. Sometimes you'll turn it on and you'll turn it up and you don't get any sound at all. And you'll play with the tuning dial and you try to find a radio station and you'll put it on both AM and FM and no sound comes out of it at all. That's one common complaint. Another typical problem that people have is they'll turn it on and it's already tuned to their favorite radio station and it might play for 20 or 30 seconds or a minute or 2 minutes, and then gradually the sound just kind of fades away and you have nothing. And then of course there's the systems that make this unusual clicking sound. It sounds a lot like Morse code. If you stand next to the master station, you can hear it go click, 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 click. And contrary to what a lot of people might think, no, it's not aliens trying to get in touch with you, it's the intercom malfunctioning. Final problem is you have to consider the age of the unit. Tim's IMA406 here, it is 41 years old. And as well built as these are, 41 years is a really long time. And sometimes the sets just are old and tired. They're old and tired enough that even if there aren't any other problems with it, the old and tired problem is enough to make it malfunction and not work correctly, then you can't really use it. So you always have to take that into consideration, but we're going to sort that out when we do our troubleshooting. Before we start our troubleshooting, let's talk about how a perfectly installed, perfectly operational IM or IMA406 intercom system is supposed to operate, because you need to understand that, because it'll make what the other problems and the causes for those problems easier to understand. We went way back to 1978 when Tim's intercom was first installed and everything was brand new and perfect. If you have the radio playing everywhere throughout your house and someone goes to a remote station to use the intercom, when they push the talk button down to call to someone in another room, it will cause the music throughout the house to slowly fade out into the background. Instead of playing at its full volume, it'll be playing at maybe 1% of its volume. If you listened really, really carefully, you might hear it at a speaker just a little tiniest bit. And the reason they did that was if you're using the intercom for communication, they didn't want you to have to speak over the music while it was on. So it fades the music out or mutes the music into the background. And then when they move their finger and they go to push listen to hear the reply from the other person, the music stays muted. Once they stop operating the intercom buttons, the music gradually fades back into its original volume. That's how a perfectly operated IM or IMA406 system is supposed to operate. And this muting and fading is sometimes, in some ways, the source of problems that people have with their systems. Started on the troubleshooting. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to turn Tim's set off and we're going to open it up. Now, on the top of the unit right here is a pin, and you pull the pin out and the set's going to hinge down. It's attached to the wall housing down here on the bottom with some hinges where it pivots. And like a lot of 406s, Tim's here, the pin is missing. Someone lost it years ago. It's probably fallen down inside the wall. So what they did was they just found a screw that was about the right size and they put a screw in place. Yours may be like this also. I would say probably more than half of the units I see in the field are done this way because the pin's gone. And then it folds down, and like most NuTone systems, it has its own support strap which has a hook on the end which is hooked to the back of the wall housing up here. If yours is sort of flopping around loose, you can reach up in there and there is a hole and you can hook it through the hole and make it stay like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at the back of the IMA406 and talk about what we're looking at, and then we'll get on to the troubleshooting. So now we have our IMA406 opened up, and let's do a quick review of what we're looking at. Here in the lower right hand corner, right here, this is the AM/FM tuner, and it has this large heavy gray coax cable. This is the antenna cable, and it goes up to the top of the wall housing, and it plugs into two little pins up there. Here we have in the center of the set, this is the main board for the system. This is the power supply, amplifier, and intercom control circuitry. Right here below that, we have this little rectangular module. This is the talk module. This is what makes the hands-free reply operate in an IMA406. And in the middle of the talk module, we have this clear plastic box that sticks up, and this is the talk relay. And the talk relay is what gives the system the ability to flip the direction of the conversation from talk to listen and talk to listen. So it's flip-flopping the direction of the conversation. Right here at the top we have the back of the speaker cone. Down here we have the selector switch. Underneath this cardboard cover there are the intercom switches and the volume control. We're not going to worry about that because I'm not going to take this off. Although I will point out that NuTone was nice enough to print on this cardboard cover the hookup instructions for the wiring that comes from the remote stations. And those wires are all connected onto this large circuit board right here on the left hand side, and this is the back of the terminal board. The terminal board, and I'll show you at the end, has switches on it that are hidden behind a door on the front of the unit. The terminal board is where all of the wires from all of the remote speakers are connected, and this is where we're going to focus our troubleshooting efforts. Off the top of the terminal board there will be a multicolored wire cable. This one has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 individual wires twisted into pairs. Depending on when your IM or IMA406 was made, it may look just like this. It may be a flat gray ribbon wire that's about 2 inches wide, or it could also be a sort of white colored ribbon cable with some individual colors, maybe red on the edge and maybe green on the other edge. It varies a little bit based on when the unit was actually manufactured, but they're all basically the same and they all do the same thing. They connect the terminal board to the amplifier intercom board over here, and that connection is made by this card right here, and it's plugged into a socket in the middle of the amplifier intercom board. So here you can see the card on the end of the multi-wired cable, and then you can also see the blue socket right down here. This is a very clever design. The reason NuTone did it this way is if this unit needed to be removed from Tim's house for service, the serviceman would go out and unplug this and remove the terminal board and leave all of the speaker wires already connected to it. He wouldn't have to take it all apart, and that way it was quick and easy to remove it, and it would be quick and easy to put it back. So the first thing we're going to try is, let's take a review of what some of our common problems are. Some of the common problems can be that you turn your system on and it doesn't make any sound at all. It turns on, but the radio doesn't play any longer. Another common problem is that you turn it on and the radio plays for a little while, and then the radio slowly fades away or becomes muted like we talked about. And finally, another common problem is you turn it on and instead of the radio coming on, you hear this click, click, click Morse code noise that you might think are aliens, but it's not. It's the relay here on the talk module. It's energizing and de-energizing and going click, 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 and that's what you're hearing. Like with all intercom troubleshooting, the very first thing we want to do is try to make a determination, is the problem something in the master station, or is it a problem that's being caused by some other part of the system beyond the master station? And fortunately, on an IMA406 or an IM406, it's pretty easy to do. You can actually unplug this card, and by unplugging it, you disconnect the master station from all of the wiring and remote speakers, and basically what you have left is a radio. But if it's a radio that behaves itself, then you've learned something. The very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to unplug this card from the blue socket. Now, you have to be careful when you do this. Every time you work on a system that's as old as Tim's, you have to take into consideration it's 41 years old. Things get brittle, things get stuck. You have to be careful with it. If you manhandle it and you're rough with it, you can break something. The blue socket is made out of plastic, and the blue plastic tends to get brittle over the years. And I have seen sets come in here where the socket is broken altogether, and then the card won't stay in place, it won't make a good connection, it won't play the remote speakers properly, and then it has to be replaced. There is not an endless supply of blue sockets in the world, so you have to be careful. To unplug the card from the socket, the best way to do it is you grab it at either end with your fingers like this, and you kind of rock it back and forth while you pull up on it, and it'll pop out just like that. What you don't want to do is grab the wires and give it a big tug, because if you do that, you're bound to break the socket or pull the wires out at the end of the card, and then you've got to solder it to fix it, and most people can't do that. Once you've unplugged this, we'll tuck it out of the way for a minute, we have now isolated the master station, all of this, from all of the remote stations. If we tip Tim's intercom back up, so you can see the front of it, and if we turn it on, what do you know? It plays. So what did we learn by doing this? What we learned is that there's some problem that's not the master station itself, but something beyond the master station. It could be a wiring problem, or it could be a problem with the remote station that's muting the radio on the master station. So now we have a better idea where to look. Now, just as an aside, when Tim did this troubleshooting, as I directed him over the phone what to do, what he found was when he unplugged the cable, the master station still didn't play. It had the little, I think, tiniest amount of volume, but it wouldn't play properly because it was old and tired. But I've already rebuilt it all, so now it's like brand new and it plays really well. So now, in our example of troubleshooting, we know that we have to look for a problem over here. We have to look for a problem, something that's being caused by one of the remote stations. Before we start our troubleshooting of the terminal board and the wiring, I wanted to show you really quick what happens to the talk relay when you have another type of problem, which is similar to the problem that we're going to find when we do the troubleshooting at the terminal board. So we're looking at the talk module or the talk relay right here, and what it will do is this. This is where you get your clicking, popping Morse code noise. Now, if you know Morse code, you might know what I tapped out there. Anyway, that's what the clicking noise. If you have clicking noise, this is what's causing the clicking noise. Just to jump ahead for a second, no, you cannot just remove the talk module from the intercom system to bypass the problem and hear the radio again, because if you remove the talk module, then the radio won't play no matter what you do. You have to have it in there. It has to be complete for everything to work. So let's get on with our troubleshooting. Before we start our troubleshooting, let's talk about the NuTone intercom wire, because if you understand how the wire is used, it will make your troubleshooting efforts a lot simpler. So this is NuTone IW6. IW6 is a 6-conductor cable. The wires are color-coded as red, orange, and black, and they're twisted into pairs. So you have a red pair, an orange pair, and a black pair. And to index the wires in each pair, one wire will be solid red and one is red with a white stripe. And then you have a solid orange and orange with a white stripe, and solid blacks and blacks with a white stripe. And that's how you index it. And I should point out, this somewhat of a tangle you see here, this is what you're going to find most likely when you open up your IM or IMA406. When I made up this example here, I did it in a way that would be most like what you're going to find. It's a lot of wires in a fairly small space, and a lot of them are bundled together and all go under one screw connection. So it's difficult, unless you spend a lot of time on it, to make it neater than this. So how are the wires used? Well, it's actually pretty simple. If we move some of these out of the way so we can see better, you'll notice that the red and red-white pairs all are connected to these screws that go down sort of the center of the terminal board. And they're each connected to their own individual screw and actually printed on the circuit board over here and also on the cardboard label over here that you can see. They're connected as red, red, white, red, red, white, red, red, white, and they're connected in pairs as they come out of each cable. Now this is a fairly maxed out IMA406 system. It actually has 9 remote stations, which was not uncommon for back in those days. What do the red wires do? The red wires are the music wires. Their only purpose in the system is to send the music from the radio to the remote speakers. That's what they do. So the red wires are very rarely ever a problem because they're not intercom wires, they're just music wires. And music wires can't make the talk relay energize. They can't mute the system. They can't hardly do anything except make the music play in the remote speakers. But over here on the edge, we have the black and black-white wires and the orange and orange-white wires. And they're all grouped together by their color, and they're connected underneath these large screws on the edge of the terminal board. In fact, here we have a wire that's come loose, so we'll have to figure out where that goes. And the way this works is, starting at the bottom, this is black with a white stripe, and then black, and orange with a white stripe, and orange up here underneath the tangle that's hard to see. The way this was done, the installer did it the proper way. He took all of the black-white wires, he stripped off the ends, he stuffed them all under this big giant screw, and then tightened the screw down to hold them all in place. Same thing with the black, the orange, white, and the orange. The orange pair and the black pair are intercom wires. They're the wires that are used when you operate the intercom control buttons on the remote stations for door talk and listen and inside talk and listen. That's what all of these wires are used for. So these are the types of wires, because they're intercom wires, that could cause the talk relay to energize and make the Morse code sound. It could also be the wires that cause the radio to become muted, as if someone's using the intercom even though they're not. These are the wires that we suspect as being problematic when you have those type of problems with an IMA or an IM406. So the troubleshooting is actually easy, but it will take a little bit of time to do. In this installation, there are 9 wires under each screw, plus we have this loose one here, and we'll talk about that in a second. We already know that the problem has to be somewhere in all of this or in some part of the house, because we unplugged the card from the blue socket and then the system worked properly. What we're going to do is we're going to further isolate the system by disconnecting the black pair and the orange pairs from the terminal board. We're not going to worry about the red pairs because the red pairs only carry the music, and we don't need to worry about those because those wires can't cause the kind of problems that we talked about. Now, which pairs should we disconnect first? Well, it's sort of how lucky do you feel. You could do the black pair first, or you could do the orange pairs first. It's really up to you. It's not more likely to be one set than the other. It's very random and you never really know. What you have to do is you just have to take a chance and see. So what I'm going to do here first is I'm going to disconnect the black-white wires. Now, when you do this, you want to have the system shut off right now. So there's all of our black-white wires here. And I can tell from this one, the one that's loose, I know where that goes. This one and this white one, they're twisted together, these are the wires that come from the front door speaker. Because on an IM and an IMA406 system, the front door speaker cone gets connected to the black-white pair down here. So this one came out from underneath the screw. I guess the installer didn't tighten the screw down well enough and the wire slipped out. It's hard to find good help nowadays. So we've disconnected our black-white wires, and now what we can do, and when you have these disconnected and you have all of these bare copper ends here where the insulation has been stripped off, you don't want these touching everything and all that kind of stuff. You want to make sure that they're just hanging up here in the air so they don't mess anything up. So once you've disconnected those, now what you can see is we can turn the system back on and see if the music plays. I've tipped the set back up and we're going to turn it on. And we'll turn it up. And we don't get anything. It still doesn't play. So it's not the black-white wires. So now we have to continue on. So we're going to turn it off again. And we're going to tilt it down. And now I'm going to disconnect all the black wires. I'll take the second door speaker wire off. The wires that come from the front door speaker, they can't cause these kind of problems. It's not going to happen. It has to be the actual true intercom wires. So we've disconnected, loosened the screw, and we'll take our black wires out and we'll put those up in the air so they're out of the way. And then we're going to turn the system on again and see if it plays. Here I have it tipped back up again, and we'll go ahead and turn it on. And what do you know? It plays. So we've made some improvement here. We made some headway on our troubleshooting. So what we've learned is by disconnecting first the black-white wires and trying the radio, it didn't play. And then we disconnected all the black wires and we tried the radio, and then it did play. So it's something wrong with one of the black wires. And usually in most houses, it's only one that's a problem, although sometimes you could have more than one. Now, what you have to understand is, in this particular example, we found fairly quickly that there was a problem with one of the black wires. And we're going to get back to that in just a second. But it would have been just as likely that it could have been a problem with an orange-white wire, or it could have been a problem with an orange wire. We don't really know. We just got kind of lucky because we found it on the second try. But sometimes it takes 3 or 4 tries before you figure out which one it is. So don't think that it's always going to be a black wire or a black-white wire. It could be any one of them. You don't really know. You do the same steps. If, for instance, if we didn't find a problem with when we disconnected the black wires, then we would have moved on and done the orange-white wires. If we found the problem there, then we could continue on with the next steps of troubleshooting I'm going to show you now. But if we didn't find it with the orange-white wires, then we would have to gone to the orange wires, because that's the way troubleshooting goes. There's no shortcuts on troubleshooting. Now what we have to do is we have to figure out which one of our black wires is a problem. And this is where patience comes in, because you have to do this correctly, otherwise you'll end up having to do it all over again because you didn't find the problem. So as we discussed earlier, all of the wires are in pairs, and the pairs come out of each individual cable. So the way you want to do this is the same way the installer would have done it in the first place. You have to sort through the tangle of wires, and you have to find the black and black-white that make up each pair out of each cable. So there's one, and it comes out of a cable here. And then grab another one and root around a little bit until you find its other half there, and there's another pair. And what I like to do when I do this is I stand there and do this all in the beginning, because you're going to have to do it anyway. And if you're doing a task, sometimes it's much quicker to do the same step over and over again instead of going back to the step. So we'll sort these out into pairs. There's a pair. That's not a pair. That looked like a pair, but it wasn't. You really have to make sure, because when you have a lot of wires, it can become somewhat of a tangle like you see here. But this is real world what you're going to experience. And what you can do, like this is a pair here, what you can do if you want to keep it a little neater is you can wrap them back together a little bit and just leave a couple inches at the end like that, because that makes it less of a tangle and it's easier to identify where they go. They won't get mixed up again. So we'll do that a little bit here. You know, the neater you make this when you do it, the easier it will be. However, what you find when you look at most installations is neatness was not a priority. Usually what you've got is someone sort of speeded through it. They were in a hurry, got to get it done, got to get to the next house. So whatever works, because you know, you're going to close it up and you're not going to see it, so nobody cares. But you should have pride in your workmanship. and try to make it as neat as you possibly can. That's of course not to say that you should take all of this apart and redo it all just for the sake of neatness, because sometimes when you disturb things greatly, like taking it all apart, you'll create more problems than you're trying to solve. So I don't really recommend that. We've got 2 more to go. That one's down there. And we'll twist all these together a little bit. And we're not twisting them real tight because they don't need to be. It's just what I call a casual twist. They're just sort of wrapped around each other, because that makes it easier. Now you can see we still have a lot of wires, but now they're kind of in pairs again. So it's a little easier to deal with. Instead of being a big giant tangle, it's one pair at a time. So what are we going to do? Well, what we're going to do is you have to remember, what was the goal? The goal was to find which black wire was causing the problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to reconnect each one of these one at a time, and then turn the set back on and see if it still continues to play. So I'll show you the first one. So here's our first pair, and I'm going to take them and put the black wire under its screw terminal and the black white wire under its screw terminal, like that. Just slip them underneath, and then we'll tighten the screws down like this and like this. And yes, the screws have to be tight. No, you don't have to wrench on them. Just make them snug. That's fine. Now we've hooked up our first pair. Then what we would do is tip the set back up. We would turn the radio on and see if it still plays. If it does still play, then we know this one's not the problem. Then what we would do is add to it, turn it off. Then we would take the next set and hook up the next set in addition to the first set. Don't keep disconnecting them. You're adding to what you've already got. You're building on something that works. We know that the first pair we hooked up works, and now we're going to hook up our second pair, and if that one works, then we tip it up, turn it on. If it still plays, that's good. Then we know that one's okay, and then we do the third set, so we're adding to the first two to make sure, and then we tip it up, turn it on. If it still plays, that's good. And then we do our fourth set. Now, we hook up our fourth set and we tip up the master station, we turn it on, and guess what? There's no radio. The radio's gone. It doesn't play anymore. It played after sets 1, 2, and 3, but number 4 messed it all up. So what does that tell you? It tells you that number 4 is your culprit. Number 4 is the one that's causing the problem, or it's one of the ones causing the problem, because you may have more than one. So we have to continue on. So what you would do is you would disconnect number 4 and you would put it off to the side. And what I like to do when I'm on a service call is I would take it and maybe twist a little hoop in it like that, because that way you remember that's the one with the problem and it doesn't get mixed up with all the other ones that you have to continue on with. Then you continue on, you do number 5 and you do number 6 and you do number 7, and as long as it all continues to work, you just keep adding back on and adding back on until ultimately at the end you've got all the wires hooked back up. The radio still plays. The intercom most likely will work. We still have to test it, but we know that the problem was the one on number 4. Now that we've identified cable number 4 as the problem, now we have a point where we get to make a decision. We have to decide, is it worth continuing on and going to the next step of troubleshooting to try to see if we can solve the problem completely, or are we just going to leave this one pair of wires disconnected to whichever room that cable goes to? If you leave this wire disconnected to one of the rooms, you're going to lose some of the intercom functionality of that station. The radio will still play and you can probably have people call into that room, but you won't have full functionality. For some people, because they don't use the intercom that much, that's okay with them. They'll go with that, because to continue on with the troubleshooting is a little bit involved. If you want to do the next part of the troubleshooting, what you have to do is you have to first identify which cable of wires number 4 belongs to. And what you do is you look in your tangle here and we find that it's this wire right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our red Sharpie here and we're going to put a little X on it, because that way I don't have to hunt for it every time. I know it's the one with the red X. And what we really need to figure out is, what room does the cable with the red X go to? Is it the master bedroom? Is it the laundry room? Is it a patio station? We don't know at this point, but we have to figure that out. And the way to do that is, if we follow the red and red-white wires out of the cable with the red X, we can find down here that way down here it's connected to station number 9. Now, we still don't know which room number 9 is, and odds are on the front of the master station next to all the switches, it won't be labeled, because most installers never label anything. So what we're going to do is, we're going to take our screwdriver and we're going to loosen one of the two red screws that hold the red and red-white wires in place. It doesn't matter which one you disconnect, it's your choice. It doesn't make any difference. But we're going to disconnect the red-white wire because that's just the one I did. Now what we've done is we've disconnected one half of the music pair to whichever room that goes to. And by doing that, when we turn the radio on, the radio will play everywhere in the house except that room, because you've disconnected the music from that room. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tip our master station back up. We're going to turn it on so the music plays, and then you're going to run around through your house and you're going to find which room isn't playing, because that's the room that's associated with the cable with the red X on it. Once you've figured out which room it is, let's say in this case it's the laundry room, because you know it's always the laundry room, it seems like. So you know it's the laundry room, something connected with the laundry room station. Here's what you do. At this point we know it's either the cable with the red X that has a problem. Maybe there's a short in the cable. Maybe a mouse chewed on the wire and there's a short because it ate the insulation. Or maybe it was put in and held up in place with metal staples, and over the years, after 40 years, maybe the metal staple rubbed through the insulation on the cable and it's shorting out a couple of the wires. So it could be something like that, or it could be that there's a problem with the remote station. If there's a problem with the remote station, then it would be a problem usually with one of the switches in the remote station. What you're going to do is you're going to remove the remote station from the wall, and you're going to flip it over on the back, and you're going to disconnect the 6 wires that connect to the screws on the back of the remote station. And here's what your remote station will look like. This one's a little raggedy because it's the one we use here at the shop for testing. This is an ISA 45. It's the standard speaker for an IMA406 system. And you have your inside patio talk and listen. You have your door speaker talk and listen and a volume control. But if we flip it around in the back, we have a speaker cone and we have the switchboard here. And on the switchboard, there are 6 screws. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you look carefully, you'll see printed on the board next to each screw is which color wire gets attached to that screw. We have black, we have red, white, black, white, orange, orange, white, and finally red. So you're going to take this off the laundry room wall, you're going to flip it over, you're going to loosen the screws, you're going to disconnect all 6 wires. You're not going to let the ends of the wires touch each other. You're going to make sure they all stay separate. They're just sticking out of the wall, hanging in midair, and that's fine. Don't worry about it. But just don't let them all touch, because that's not right. And then what you do is you go back to the master station and you need to reconnect the red-white wire that you disconnected from one of the screws for speaker number 9. And it'll be sometimes a little tricky to get in through the bundle and get it tightened down. So we'll hook that back up. So now the red and red-white pair are intact. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take our culprit wire, wire number 4, the infamous one with the loop on it. And what we're going to do is we're going to undo the loop so we have some length. And then you're going to hook it back up to the black and black-white screws on the terminal board and turn the system on and see if it plays. And one of 2 things is going to happen. If the system plays with all of the wires reconnected, because the last connections we made were the black, white wires from cable number 4, the one with the red X. If the system all plays and it's all good, then you know it's a problem with the speaker. And more specifically, it's a problem with the switches in the speaker. It's not the speaker cone, it's always the switches. So we know that because this is the last thing we disconnected. This is the last thing we eliminated from the system. We know the wire is okay because all the wires are hooked up and it still works. Now, if you turn it on and it doesn't play, that means that there's a problem with the cable. There's probably a short in the cable or something like that because it's not the speaker, because the speaker's been removed. It's not connected to anything anymore. All we have left is the wire. At that point, if you have a short in a wire, unless you're super dedicated and you have a house that's really easy to crawl around the attic and work on it, most people aren't going to do all of that. Most people are going to live with the fact that the laundry room speaker is going to have limited functionality. They're going to leave the black-white wire disconnected. They're going to coil it up. They know it's the one with the red X. And actually what you should do is you should cut off the bare ends, because you don't want bare ends floating around inside the intercom when you close it all back up, because that's not good. It's not necessary. They could over time somehow touch something, cause a short that could cause other problems, and you don't need all of that. So that's the basic troubleshooting of an IM or an IMA406 intercom system. It's not nearly as difficult as people think, although if you have a really big system, say something like this with 9 stations, it's going to take you a little bit of time, but it's time well spent, because most of the problems, in my experience, other than cables that a mouse has chewed on, most of the problems are caused by switches in remote speakers. And in light of that, we of course always suspect outdoor patio stations first. Why? Because they've been outside for 40 some years. They get rained on, and these are not nearly as sealed up as models they made later on. And if the water gets inside, it can corrode the switches and cause all kinds of problems. And you know, it's just normal aging of the equipment. For those of you who are thinking, well, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to mess around with all this wiring at the Master Station thing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go around my house and I'm going to take all the remote speakers off. I don't recommend doing that at all. The biggest problem with doing that is, one, in most houses, since these systems were installed in the 70s, the rooms have been painted a lot of times, and you'll have a certain amount of paint seal around the edge of the speaker. And when you try to take the speaker off the wall, you're going to mess up the paint on the wall, and then you're going to get yelled at for doing that. And you might end up having to repaint the room, so we don't want to go there. The other problem is it takes a lot of time to take all the stations off the walls, and also by taking the stations off the wall, you're betting on it's a bad remote speaker, and many times it is. But in this particular case, since you tried to jump ahead and save some time, it's going to end up being a cable that a mouse chewed on. And you'll have taken all those off the wall, and you'll have done all of that for nothing in the end. And then you've got to come to the Master Station and do what I showed you here in the video. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps it will be helpful. If it is, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that always helps. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell or on the wheel, put in your email address, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.